I just found out my boss is a werewolf, and he says I'm his mate. Chapter 1. The rain in Viridian City didn't fall, it assaulted the glass. Each drop was a cold, tiny weapon against the window of my cramped studio apartment, matching the frantic, terrified drumming in my chest. Tonight felt different. The city, usually a predictable maze of concrete and ambition, felt like a cage ready to snap shut, its million neon eyes watching me. I gripped the cheap phone, the plastic digging into my palm. My mother's voice, filtered through static and miles of fiber optic cable, was the only thing keeping me anchored. But tonight that anchor was fraying. "You have to be careful, Mary," she whispered, her voice barely a thread above the howling wind outside and the growing terror inside me. I heard the tremor in her words, the familiar sound of a woman who had lived her life looking over her shoulder. "They're getting closer. I can feel the shift in the air." A wave of nausea hit me. I swallowed hard, the sound like dry sandpaper in my throat. I hated this conversation, hated the lie I was about to tell. "Mom, I'm fine, I promise. Just another Tuesday in Viridian City." It was a blatant, desperate fabrication. My sanctuary felt like a pressure cooker. Every shadow was a lurking threat. Every creak of the old buildings pipes a phantom footstep coming up the stairs. The thin veneer of Mary Leonardo, the diligent, low-profile administrative assistant at Greenwood Global, was disintegrating. "No, baby, this isn't just another Tuesday. This is about us." Her voice cracked, and I could picture her miles away, clutching the small silver locket she always wore, her eyes wide with that fear I carried in my own bones. The fear that was a permanent, cold tremor beneath my professional facade. The fear of being found. The fear of being seen for what I truly was, an untamed thing with a hidden strength. My eyes drifted upward to the full moon. It was a spectral, luminous orb, briefly peering through the bruised, low-hanging clouds. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but also a cruel, magnetic force. It was calling to me, a relentless, ancient song that hummed in my blood, yearning to be set free. But I couldn't. Not here. Not in this towering concrete jungle where a single moment of mistake, a single loss of control, could cost me my meticulously constructed anonymity. A sudden, jarring clang from the metal fire escape outside my window made me jump, the phone almost slipping from my wet hand. My heart vaulted into my throat. I pressed my back against the cold plaster wall, holding my breath. "Mom, I have to go," I whispered, my voice thick with sudden, uncontrolled adrenaline. "Be safe, my heart. Always remember who you are, remember your strength." Her words were a final, desperate lifeline, even as they felt like a heavy chain, anchoring me to a life of perpetual flight. I hung up, my hand shaking so violently I had to brace it against the wall. The clang repeated, louder, closer. A shadow, dark and heavy, moved on the fire escape, briefly silhouetted against the pale, silver glow of the moon. "They found me." After 5 years of running, of hiding behind sensible cardigans and early clock-outs, they had finally tracked me down. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my insides. My tiny apartment, my boring job, my carefully managed invisibility, it was all a lie, and now the savage, untamed truth was scratching at my windowpane. My hands clenched so tight that my nails dug crescent-shaped warnings into my palms. My heightened senses, usually deliberately dulled for self-preservation, sharpened with a terrifying speed. I could smell the ozone, the damp concrete, the sharp metallic tang of my own fear. But beneath it a new scent, acrid and primal, filled the small space. It was the scent of wet, matted fur and aggression. A scent I recognized with a sickening, final jolt, not just one but 3 wolves. And they were not friendly. The shadow pressed hard against the glass, distorting into a grotesque, inhuman shape. My breath hitched. This wasn't a common mugger or a clumsy neighbor. This was the past I had fled, the violence I had desperately tried to outrun, finally catching up in flesh and blood. A low, menacing growl vibrated through the glass, twisting my gut. My own blood answered, a fierce, desperate countergrowl threatening to break free. I fought it, fought the agonizing urge to transform, to unleash the raw, silver power dormant within me. Not yet. Not here. A shift now would be a public announcement, exposing everything. But the fear, pure and undiluted, was crystallizing into something else, a cold, fiery, protective rage. I wouldn't go down without a fight. I wouldn't let them drag me back into the pack politics and brutality I had escaped. My eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for anything. My sturdy coffee mug, the small stainless steel paring knife from my kitchen drawer, pathetic against the beasts waiting for me. The window groaned under the pressure, then cracked with a spiderwebbing crunch. The splintering sound echoed in the silence of my apartment, drowning out the frantic roar of my own terror. They were coming in, and I knew with a chilling certainty that my human life in Viridian City was about to shatter, just like the thin glass. Chapter 2. The jarring sound of my alarm clock, set to an unforgivingly cheerful tone, was a rude interruption to the night's lingering nightmare. I slammed my hand down, silencing the shrill noise, and slowly opened my eyes. The weak, watery rays of dawn filtered through the broken pane, a very real physical testament to the terror that had played out just hours ago. No shadow figures, no growls, and no immediate threats had materialized in the end. The wolves, for whatever reason, had retreated. All that remained was the growing dread and the spiderweb crack in the glass, a permanent scar confirming how close to the edge I'd truly been. I dragged myself out of bed, a long, weary exhalation deflating my chest. Another day to don the mask of Mary Leonardo, the quiet, almost invisible administrative assistant, my corporate armor. My small studio, usually a haven of quiet solitude, felt tainted by the lingering scent of my own panic and that faint, acrid trace of the predators I usually kept buried deep. I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection, dark circles under my eyes, a slight tremor in my hand as I meticulously brushed my dark, shoulder-length hair. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman on the run, perpetually looking over her shoulder. But I couldn't afford to show that at Greenwood Global. My boss, Lucas Greenwood, was a legend in the city, a man who, rumor had it, noticed everything. He was a force of nature in the corporate real estate world, a devastatingly handsome man who had carved out an empire with ruthless precision. And I, Mary Leonardo, was his personal assistant, a stark, forgettable contrast to the wild, untamed thing I was inside. My morning ritual was a study in denial. I dressed in my usual uniform, sensible navy skirt, charcoal blouse, colors that blended, shapes that concealed. No bright patterns, no bold statements. I wanted to be a ghost in the office, a whisper of efficiency, not a roar of power. Stepping onto the busy sidewalk was always a shock. The relentless, chaotic flow of people, the shouts, the horns, it was a sensory overload I had learned to navigate by severely muting my heightened awareness. I had to, otherwise the sheer volume of human emotion and subtle sense would overwhelm me. The Greenwood Global Tower was a gleaming, crystalline monolith, a testament to Lucas's ambition. As I stepped into the opulent lobby, the cool, polished obsidian and the hushed atmosphere always felt like entering a different world, a world where I could pretend to be just Mary Leonardo. Up in my office, which was a comfortable buffer zone adjacent to Lucas's immense corner suite, I began my day. Emails, appointments, reports. The mundane tasks were a welcome, dizzying distraction from the primal fear that still hummed beneath my skin. Around 10 o'clock, the heavy mahogany door to Lucas's office opened, and his presence instantly saturated the room. He moved with a silent, effortless grace that always unnerved me. It was the way a true predator moved, powerful, controlled, ready to strike. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, as always, but today there was a subtle tension in his jaw, a tightness around his dark eyes that sent a spike of unease through me. "Good morning, Mr. Greenwood," I said, rising instantly to retrieve his coffee, black 2 sugars, always perfect. My voice betrayed none of the turmoil raging inside. He took the mug from me, his fingers brushing mine for a fleeting, electric moment. A spark, a jolt, shot through me, hot and powerful. My breath hitched. It always happened, that strange, inexplicable current, like 2 powerful magnets drawn together despite every effort to resist. He held my gaze for a fraction of a second longer than usual. In those dark, fathomless depths, I thought I saw something ancient, primal, and utterly unreadable. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual stoic expression. "Leonardo," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "Any pressing matters I need to attend to immediately?" "No, sir. Your schedule is clear until your 11 a.m. meeting with the Sterling Group. All relevant documents are on your desk." He nodded, already turning back towards his office. "Good. Hold all my calls. I need to focus." The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the lingering scent of his expensive cologne and something else, something subtly wild that filled the air. My heart was still hammering from the brief encounter, the residual electricity buzzing in my fingertips. "It's ridiculous," I chastised myself. "He's a human boss. I'm a wolf in hiding." As the afternoon wore on, a new subtle scent wafted into my office. It was faint, barely noticeable beneath the perfumes and city smells, but my heightened senses picked it up instantly. A musky, earthy scent like damp forest floor and wet fur. Another wolf. My blood ran cold. My carefully constructed world was cracking open not just at my apartment window, but right here, in the heart of my supposed safe zone. I instinctively stiffened, my posture rigid, my senses reaching out, trying to pinpoint the source. Could it be my pursuers? Or... A chill ran down my spine. Or was it him? The thought was ludicrous. Lucas Greenwood was a powerful CEO. There was no way he could be. The scent faded, or perhaps I simply forced it back. I couldn't panic. I had a job to do, a human mask to maintain. Just as quitting time approached, the door to Lucas's office opened again. He stood there, framed by the soft light, his gaze intense. "Leonardo," he said, his voice low, "a moment." My heart skipped a beat. This was highly unusual. He rarely kept me past working hours. I walked towards his desk, my steps hesitant. Was it about the Sterling Group, or something else? He gestured for me to sit on one of the plush leather chairs, but he remained standing, leaning against the edge of the polished obsidian desk. The air in the room was suffocatingly thick with unspoken words. "I need you to stay late tonight," he said, his voice deep, resonating in the quiet room. "There's a situation, something urgent." My stomach clenched. Urgent, the word hung charged with meaning. My wolf instincts screamed at me to run, to flee, but my professional duty forced a polite response. "Of course, Mr. Greenwood, how can I assist?" He pushed himself off the desk, walking slowly towards the immense window that overlooked the glittering panorama of Viridian City. His back was to me, but I could feel the intensity of his presence radiating like heat. "It's not work-related, Mary." My blood froze solid. The admission, so unexpected, felt like a physical punch. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, a way to maintain my distance. I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Greenwood." He turned, and in his eyes I saw it. Not the cold, calculating gaze of a billionaire CEO, but something ancient, something wild, something that perfectly mirrored the savage beast lurking within me. His eyes were no longer dark brown. They were glowing, a fierce, stunning amber. His lips, usually thin and unyielding, curved into a faint, almost predatory smile. "Oh, I think you do, Mary," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr that sent shivers down my spine. He never used my first name. "I think you understand perfectly well. The scent of a hidden Luna is unmistakable, especially when she tries so desperately to mask it." My human mask shattered. The fear, the anger, the raw, defiant wolf within me rose to the surface, snarling. He knew, all this time he knew, the game was over. My quiet human life was a beautiful lie, finally and utterly exposed. The man who had exposed it was not just my boss, but something far, far more dangerous. Chapter 3. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the low hum of the office ventilation and the frantic, echoing thump of my own heart. Lucas Greenwood stood before me, his eyes now fully aflame with that otherworldly amber light. The air around him shimmered with a raw, primal authority that commanded every cell in my body to attention. You know, he continued, his voice no longer the polished cadence of the CEO, but a guttural rumble. The scent of a hidden Luna is unmistakable, Mary. You can wear all the sensible skirts you want, but the power you carry is a beacon. My carefully constructed persona lay in glittering shards on the polished floor of my mind. The shock was quickly giving way to fury. My own eyes, I knew, were beginning to burn with a dangerous silver light that was the mark of my hidden strength. I met his gaze, refusing to back down, the defiance of my wolf rising up. And the scent of an arrogant alpha is equally overpowering, I retorted, the words tumbling out, laced with a venom I usually kept suppressed. This was not the docile secretary. This was the caged animal fighting for its last piece of freedom. A flicker of something amusement, surprise crossed his face. His lips curved into a genuine, brief, chest-shaking smile. Feisty, I like that. He walked back to his desk, leaning against the obsidian surface. I've been watching you, Mary, not just as an employee. I've known about your nature since the day you started. Your little human life, your meticulously crafted persona, it was very convincing. To a human. He pushed a sealed envelope across the desk. But the scent of your wolf, a lone wolf with that kind of power, has been a mystery. I've been waiting for you to make a move, but you seem content with existing on the fringes. Content, I scoffed, my voice thick with sarcasm. I'm surviving, there's a difference, and I am not your Luna, I don't belong to anyone. He sighed, the sound entirely wolf. Don't you? A rogue element, the Ross Syndicate has been tracking you for months, Mary. They're the ones scratching at your window. Last night wasn't random, it was a test, a subtle threat to force your hand. My blood ran cold. He knew about the shadows, the growl. All this time I had been running blindly, believing I was alone, when in fact I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, the fear and betrayal mixing into a raw cry. And break your little charade before the timing was right. You wouldn't have believed me, besides it wasn't my place. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering, oblivious city. But now they've become more reckless, the rules have changed, your human life is no longer safe. He turned back to face me, his gaze sharp and focused. You have two choices, Mary. You can stay here and try to face the Richard Ross problem alone, a suicide mission, or you can come with me, join my pack at the Whispering Peaks estate, be protected. The words hung in the air, a terrifying proposition. Join a pack. I had been a lone wolf since my father's death. The idea of being tied to a group, to a leader, was suffocating. My fiercely independent nature roared in protest. No, I won't be collared, I won't be owned. This isn't about ownership, Lucas said, his voice dropping in frustration. It's about survival. They won't stop until they have you. Your scent is a beacon, a challenge to them. They see your independence as weakness, a prize to be claimed. And a Luna without an alpha is a prize to be claimed by every rogue who smells her. His words struck me like a physical blow. The reality of my peril, the true immediate danger, finally eclipsed my pride. My independence, my 5 years of solitary running, was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The thought of being captured by Richard Ross, a tyrant known for his cruelty, made my blood turn to ice. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He held my gaze, his own softening just a fraction, a momentary crack in the alpha persona. I want you to be safe. I want you to be with your people. I want what is mine. The possessiveness in his voice, the raw, unapologetic claim, was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. The primal part of me, the wolf, recognized the scent of a fated mate, and a deep, satisfied hum resonated through my veins. And if I refuse, what if I just disappear? A dark shadow crossed his face and his eyes hardened. You can try, but they will find you, and when they do, your fate will be much worse than just being collared. I am offering you an alliance. Don't be foolish enough to turn it down. He was right, I knew he was. I had been running for too long and I was exhausted. What would I have to do? I asked, my shoulders slumping in defeat. A flicker of triumph shone in his amber eyes. You come with me, you learn to embrace your wolf, You learn to trust me, and you let me protect you." He walked toward me, his presence overwhelming. He smelled of rain-soaked earth, aged cedar, of something wild and intoxicating. "It won't be easy, Mary. You've been running for so long you've forgotten how to live." He reached out and gently cupped my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin. The contact was like an electric shock, igniting every dormant nerve ending. My breath hitched. "And I'm going to remind you," he murmured, his voice a promise and a threat all at once. The sudden buzzing of my phone on my desk shattered the moment. I flinched, pulling away. Lucas stepped back, a subtle, low growl rumbling in his chest. The caller ID was Mom. My human life might be over, but I had one last call to make, one final goodbye. I picked up the phone. "Mom," I whispered, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "It's me, I'm leaving, I'll explain later, I'm safe for now." I hung up before she could respond, knowing she would understand. She had known this day would come. I looked back at Lucas, the powerful, enigmatic man who was no longer just my boss, but a werewolf alpha and my fated mate. "Now let's go," he commanded. "I have a jet waiting, your human life is over, your real life is just beginning." The line between my two worlds had just been irrevocably erased. The corporate assistant was dead. The wolf was about to be reborn. Chapter 4. The world outside the private jet's tinted window was a blur, the endless sprawl of the city quickly giving way to the black velvet curtain of rural American night. I sat across from Lucas, the low, steady drone of the engines the only sound besides the frantic, uneven tapping of my shoe on the plush carpet. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of emotions, fear, confusion, and a terrifying, nascent excitement. I was no longer Mary Leonardo, the anonymous secretary. I was just Mary, the wolf on the run, now seated across from the most powerful, enigmatic alpha I had ever encountered. "You're an accountant, right?" he asked, his voice cutting through my internal turmoil. I blinked, momentarily thrown by the mundane nature of the question. "An administrative assistant, Mr. Greenwood, personal assistant to a CEO to be exact." My voice was brittle, defensive. A faint, almost teasing smile touched his lips. "Right, you've been doing a remarkable job of keeping your books balanced both professionally and otherwise." He paused, his amber gaze fixed on my face. "I've been reviewing your file, the personal one. No family contacts besides your mother, no close friends, you've cut all ties. The scent of a ghost, a phantom wolf." His words struck me. He wasn't just my boss, he had been my watcher. He knew my secrets, my solitude, the carefully constructed walls I had built around my life. The thought was both infuriating and strangely comforting. I had been so alone for so long. "Survival," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I had to. You can't leave a trail if you're a ghost." "True," he conceded, leaning forward, the cedar and pine scent of him surrounding me. "But a ghost cannot thrive. She can only exist. I want you to live, Mary, truly live." The jet began its steep descent. The lights of a sprawling, magnificent estate came into view, a collection of timber and stone nestled in a vast valley, surrounded by dense, ancient forests. I could feel the energy of the land, a raw, primal power that vibrated through the plain's floor. His territory, his home, and now, for better or worse, it was mine too. We landed on a discreet, private airstrip. A sleek, matte black SUV was waiting. Standing beside it was a tall, powerfully built man with a quiet, stoic strength in his dark eyes. His scent, a mix of old leather and fresh moss, was a soothing anchor amidst my rising emotions. This was Isaac, the beater, Lucas's second in command. "Welcome home, Alpha," Isaac said, his voice a low, steady rumble. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, a flash of curiosity and deep respect in his eyes. Lucas nodded. "Isaac, this is Mary. She is under my direct protection." Isaac held the car door open for me. I slid into the back seat, the powerful, familiar scent of the Alpha filling the confined space. Lucas sat beside me, his presence a heavy, overwhelming force. Isaac drove, navigating the winding dirt road that led into the heart of the estate. The Whispering Peaks estate was a marvel. The central manor house, modern and imposing, was surrounded by smaller, more rustic cabins and a vast, enclosed training ground. The air was thick with the scent of dozens of wolves, each with their own unique signature. It was a cacophony of power, a symphony of a shared existence I had only ever read about. "This is it," Lucas said, his voice a quiet command. "This is my home, this is your future." He led me into the main house, a grand, open-concept space dominated by high ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. Pack members moved about, their eyes wide with intense curiosity as they took in my presence. "Aluna," the word seemed to hang in the air, a hushed whisper on everyone's lips. They were sizing me up, judging me. I could feel their collective consciousness, a silent hum of questions and assessments. Lucas introduced me to a few senior members, his voice formal, his words a clear declaration of my new status. "This is Mary. She is under my protection. Any harm that comes to her is an attack on me and on this pack." His statement was a warning, a line drawn in the sand. I was his, at least for now. That night I was given a private space, a cozy, rustic cabin near the forest line with a vast bed and a stone fireplace. The room smelled of fresh cedar and clean linen, a world away from my cramped urban studio. As I lay in the soft bed, I could feel the pack around me, a silent, powerful presence. It was strange, terrifying, and yet, for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. Chapter 5. The following morning, the real work began. Lucas wasted no time. He took me to the training grounds, a vast clearing nestled beneath towering pines. He stripped off his jacket and shirt, his sculpted muscles flexing, his amber eyes all business. "You've been hiding your wolf for too long, Mary. It's time to let her out." I hesitated, my palms sweating. Shifting in front of someone else was an act of ultimate vulnerability. It was a surrender. My wolf, fierce and independent, resisted. She snarled, she growled, but Lucas's will, his raw alpha power, was an irresistible force. "Now, Mary," he commanded, his voice a low, dangerous tone. "Unleash her. Let her run." I closed my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and forced myself to let go. The transformation was agonizing, a familiar tearing of flesh, a cracking and reshaping of bone, but this time it was different. I was letting go, not just for survival, but for the first time in my life for myself. I felt the surge of raw, untamed energy coursing through my veins. The world smelled, sounded, and felt different, more vibrant, more alive. I opened my eyes, a low, guttural growl rumbling in my chest. I was a wolf, a majestic, powerful creature with sleek, silver-white fur and piercing green-gold eyes. I met Lucas's gaze. His own wolf, a massive, solid black beast with glowing amber eyes, stood before me. He was breathtaking, a perfect representation of controlled power and ancient nature. He nudged me with his snout, a silent command to follow. We ran through the forest, the wind whipping through my fur, the soft, damp earth flying under my paws. It was pure, unadulterated freedom. I felt alive. I felt wild. I felt home. We ran for hours, a blur of motion and raw power. When we finally stopped, panting heavily at the edge of a roaring river, I shifted back, exhausted but thoroughly exhilarated. My human body was sore, but my spirit soared. Lucas shifted back as well, his eyes still holding a hint of their amber glow. "You see," he said, his voice soft, a stark contrast to his usual hard tone, "you don't have to be a ghost anymore." He reached out and gently touched my face. "You're a force of nature, Mary, a beautiful, powerful force of nature, and you're mine." His words, his touch, his scent, it was an overwhelming assault on my senses. He was right. I was a part of something bigger now. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a member of a pack. I was a Luna, and I was falling for my alpha. Chapter 6. The days bled into weeks, each one a whirlwind of relentless training, strategic pack meetings, and a simmering, complicated tension between Lucas and me. Our relationship was a constant dance of alpha command and lunar defiance, professional distance and primal attraction. At the estate he was my alpha and my mate, the man teaching me how to be a wolf. But the war with the rival alpha, Richard Ross, was always the backdrop. Richard Ross, a brutal and ambitious wolf known for his volatility, was a constant, looming threat. He knew about me, about my presence, and he saw it not just as a prize, but as a direct challenge to Lucas's dominance. The shadow war continued, primarily fought on two fronts. In the corporate world, Greenwood Global and Ross Holdings were locked in a vicious hostile takeover battle. Lucas was relentless, using his business acumen to systematically dismantle Richard's empire piece by piece. I was back in a secretary role, but the stakes were astronomical. I wasn't just typing reports, I was on the front lines, helping Lucas fight a war that mirrored the one being waged in the wild. I sat in the Central Command office at the estate one afternoon, a mountain of high-level files on my desk, when Isaac the beater walked in. His face was grim. "He's getting desperate, Mary," Isaac said, his voice low and tight. "Richard just made a devastating move on a key property, the entire North Shore commercial district. It was a strategic blow we absolutely should have seen coming." My heart sank. A corporate setback was one thing, but this was a clear territorial challenge. "How?" I looked at Isaac, frustration etched onto his strong features. "We don't know," he admitted. "He's always one step ahead. It's like he knows our every move before we make it." A chilling thought crept into my mind. I looked at the files on my desk, the blueprints for Lucas's next corporate strike, the confidential strategy documents I had been compiling. I closed my eyes and focused my senses. A new subtle scent wafted into the room. It was faint, barely discernible beneath the familiar pack smells, but my honed lunar senses picked it up instantly. A sharp metallic odor mixed with pine, but foreign. It was the scent of a wolf I didn't know, a rogue, a spy. The realization hit me with the force of a punch. There was a mole, a traitor in the pack. My mind, trained for years to spot discrepancies in spreadsheets and memos, began to race. I had to find them. I had to warn Lucas. That night I found Lucas hunched over his desk, a massive satellite map of the entire region spread before him. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Lucas," I said, my voice trembling, "I think there's a spy. Someone is leaking information to Ross." He looked up, his eyes immediately hardening into obsidian. "What makes you say that, Mary?" "The scent," I insisted, my voice gaining strength. "A new scent in the central office. It's subtle, but it's there. A wolf who doesn't belong to the Whispering Peaks pack. A spy." Lucas rose from his chair, a powerful, intimidating force. He walked towards me and leaned in close, his nose brushing against my hair and neck. He inhaled deeply, his eyes closed. I could feel his wolf, a quiet, intense awareness confirming my suspicions. When he finally opened his eyes, they were glowing with a fierce, dangerous amber. "You're right," he said, his voice a low, gravelly growl. "You are absolutely right. But who?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'll find them, I promise." The war escalated again. Corporate moves were instantly countered. Hostile takeovers were followed by brutal retaliatory fights near the pack borders. Richard was growing more confident, more reckless. His next move was a devastating personal strike. He attacked the estate's residential block, specifically targeting the smaller, more secluded homes near the western perimeter where the families lived. It was a direct, violent act meant to send an unequivocal message. My heart felt like it was ripping in two as I saw the smoke rising from the perimeter. Lucas's face was a mask of controlled fury, his eyes burning with a murderous light. Richard Ross had crossed the ultimate line. The shadow war had moved into the light, and I, the former secretary, was caught in the middle. I had to choose, my corporate diligence or my wolf instinct. Deep down, I knew they were no longer separate. I had to fight for both. Chapter 7. The air at the Whispering Peaks estate was thick with tension, a palpable hum of fear, grief, and absolute rage. The fire at the residential block had been contained, and mercifully the casualties were minimal, but the terror was profound. Richard Ross's message was chillingly clear. He was willing to target the innocent to get what he wanted. He was not a rival. He was a monster, and the fury inside me transformed the quiet assistant into a she-wolf ready for battle. Lucas was a storm of contained violence. He moved with a dangerous stillness, his eyes cold and hard, a predator focused entirely on the hunt. He called a pack meeting, his voice a low, commanding growl that silenced the immense dining hall. I stood by his side, my posture straight, my eyes scanning the faces of our assembled pack members. The spy is among them. The traitor. "We have a leak," Lucas announced, his gaze sweeping over the assembled wolves. "Someone is feeding Richard Ross information. We've suffered losses because of it." His eyes fell briefly on a young female wolf whose home had been damaged. The message was unmistakable. The traitor was responsible for her family's pain. A ripple of collective anger went through the crowd. Their silence was a promise of vengeance. I spent the next few days in a state of hyper-alertness, my senses turned up to maximum sensitivity. I was no longer Mary Leonardo, assistant, I was Mary, the detective, the hunter. I watched everyone, cataloguing their scents, their subtle shifts in demeanor, their unconscious tells. My attention kept returning to one person, Isaac. I had dismissed him as the quiet, fiercely loyal beater, Lucas's unwavering right-hand man. But something felt profoundly off. He was too composed, too quiet. His scent, usually a comforting blend of moss and leather, had a subtle, strange, almost hollow undertone I couldn't place. He was grieving the perimeter breach, yet his movements were oddly efficient, lacking the primal, messy rage the other wolves displayed. I decided to follow him. One evening, under a bruised quarter moon, I trailed him toward the western edge of the compound, keeping to the shadows of the old-growth pines. My footsteps were silent. My wolf, a low, constant rumble in my throat, was on high alert. This was a dangerous gamble, a leap of faith that could cost me my life if I was wrong. Isaac stopped at a secluded clearing, a hidden grove of ancient trees. He pulled out a small metallic device, and a subtle, high-pitched whine emanated from it. My blood ran cold. It was a signal disruptor. It was meant to block the pack's telepathic communication, our silent, constant link, the ultimate act of betrayal. Just as he was about to activate it, I moved. I lunged from the shadows, my voice a low, threatening snarl that was all wolf. "Isaac, what are you doing?" He spun around, his eyes wide with a horrific blend of shock and fear. His calm facade finally shattered. "Mary, I can explain." "Don't bother," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I already know you're the traitor." He dropped the disruptor, his shoulders slumping in absolute defeat. "I didn't have a choice," he whispered, his voice thick with a desperate plea. "Richard Ross, he has my younger sister, Sarah. He threatened to kill her slowly if I didn't cooperate. I had to." My fortress of fury cracked. The raw, human desperation in his voice was undeniable. He wasn't a monster. He was a desperate brother caught between his pack and his family. "He's been watching you, Mary," he confessed, his voice trembling. "He knew everything. He knew you were Lucas's mate, and he just wanted to get to you first. He has a plan, a trap set at the old mill boundary tonight." Trap, my mind seized on the word. Just then a twig snapped, loud and sudden, in the woods behind us. Isaac's head whipped around, his eyes wide with terror. "He knows I'm here," Isaac choked out. "He knows I've been found out." A low, menacing chorus of growls echoed through the trees. Not one wolf, dozens. The scent, a sickening mix of Richard Ross's aggressive musk and raw predator, filled the air. My heart plummeted. We were surrounded. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the trap. A trap meant to get to me, to lure Lucas out. I looked at Isaac, his face pale with fear, but his eyes holding a final resolve. "Run," I whispered, my voice firm. "Get out of here. Warn Lucas. Tell him it's the old mill boundary and it's a trap." "I can't leave you, Luna," he sobbed. "Yes, you can," I said, stepping forward. "My life is not as important as the pack's survival. Go, now." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his dark eyes meeting mine in silent apology. Then, with a single regretful nod, he turned and ran, a blur of motion disappearing into the dark, wet forest. I was alone now, a solitary she-wolf surrounded by a pack of hungry, bloodthirsty predators. I could hear their footsteps, the snarls, the rustle of leaves as they closed in. The corporate world was a distant memory, my human mask a forgotten relic. This was the real war. This was my moment of truth. My wolf, once timid and hidden, now roared with a fierce, untamed power. I was no longer running. I was fighting. For my pack, for my alpha, for myself. I stood my ground, back straight, chin held high. Let them come, I was ready. Chapter 8. The forest floor at the old mill boundary was a symphony of menace, a rising chorus of snarls and low growls that completely enveloped me. I stood alone in the clearing, the cool night air prickling my skin, my senses vibrating with adrenaline. I was outnumbered and dangerously outmatched, but the fear had finally evaporated, replaced by a cold, resolute rage. I was the Luna, a fighter, and I was going to make them pay for every single injury they had inflicted on our pack. The first wolves emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing with a malevolent, hungry light. They were the lower ranks of the Ross Syndicate, a motley pack of rogues, their coats scarred and matted, their bodies lean and hungry. They moved in a tightening circle around me, their steps a quiet, sinister rhythm. I held my ground, my eyes fixed on the biggest brute, a massive male with a heavy scar running across his face. He was the enforcer, the one who would lead the charge. Then the final wolf appeared, Richard Ross. He was a towering figure, his coat a pale, ghostly white that seemed to shimmer faintly under the bruised moonlight. He was physically magnificent, an embodiment of pure, unadulterated power. But his eyes, a cold, empty, dead blue, were a testament to the darkness within his soul. He was a monster, a king of chaos, and he wanted to take me as his prize. "Look what we have here," he said, his voice a low, mocking growl that vibrated through the damp air. "The little secretary, the timid ghost, you've come a long way from your cramped city apartment, haven't you, Mary?" "I've come far enough to know a coward when I see one," I retorted, my voice steady despite the tremor of suppressed power in my limbs. "You hide in the shadows, attacking families, using others like Isaac to do your dirty work. You're nothing but a snake." He laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that scraped against the ancient trees. "A snake? Oh, little Luna, I am a king, and you are my queen. You were always meant to be mine." He paced slowly, deliberately. "Your scent, your power, it's intoxicating. It calls to the very nature of an alpha. You belong to me. And once I have you, this entire territory, Greenwood Global, and all of Lucas's foolish pride will be mine." With a sudden, explosive motion he lunged, a blur of ghostly white fur and muscle. I was ready. I sidestepped, my body moving purely on instinct, a flash of silver against his predatory bulk. We fought, a brutal, primal dance of snapping jaws and tearing claws. Richard was stronger, faster, a seasoned warrior who had known nothing but violence. I was a fledgling, but I had a cause. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my pack, for the vulnerable families at the estate. I dodged his initial strike, managing to rake my claws across his shoulder, drawing a line of deep red. He roared in surprise and pain, his eyes narrowing in furious respect. "You have heart, little thing," he snarled, immediately returning the blow. His massive paw slammed into my side, sending me skidding back, the air momentarily knocked from my lungs. I tasted blood, and the pain was immediate and blinding. But my human stamina and lack of true battle experience were no match for his raw, animalistic strength. He pressed the attack, driving me backward until I stumbled over a moss-covered root and fell. He pinned me instantly, his heavy paw on my chest, a triumphant, guttural growl rumbling in his throat. He leaned in, his hot, fetid breath on my face. "Surrender, little one, it's so much easier that way." "Never," I snarled back, my voice raw with absolute defiance. "I'll die before I become yours." Just then, a sound that shook the very forest floor erupted behind Richard, a roar of pure, unadulterated alpha fury. "Lucas!" He burst from the trees, a blur of solid black fur, a ferocious storm of vengeance. He slammed into Richard, a violent clash of two titans, a symphony of snarls and cracking bone that made the ground tremble beneath me. Richard was a brute, but Lucas was a force of nature. He fought with the righteous, blinding fury of an alpha defending his mate. He was a whirlwind of teeth and claws, and despite the rogue's size, Lucas was winning, driven by a primal, protective love. But Richard was cunning. He knew he couldn't beat Lucas in a fair fight. Mid-tussle, he darted away from Lucas, instantly grabbing me again, his long, brutal claws digging into my arm. "You may be the alpha of this pathetic pack, Greenwood," Richard sneered, dragging me backward as a shield. "But I have your Luna, and if you take one more step I'll tear her throat out." Lucas froze. His massive body went rigid with a terrifying, absolute stillness. He looked at me, a silent, heartbreaking conversation passing between us. His eyes were filled with a mix of love, rage, and a profound, heartbreaking pain. He couldn't risk my life. "Let her go, Richard," Lucas said, shifting back to his human form just enough for the words to come out, his voice a low, lethal growl. "This is between you and me." "It's always been about her," Richard countered, his grip on my arm tightening painfully. "You will surrender Greenwood Global, your entire estate, everything you own, or I will kill her right here, right now." Lucas's shoulders slumped in defeat, a broken monument to pride and power. He had no choice. He looked at me, and his eyes, filled with a love so powerful it felt like a physical ache, sent a message that bypassed words. "I will do anything for you." "No, Lucas," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "Don't do it." "Silence," he commanded, his voice filled with a desperate, final finality. "I will not lose you." He looked at Richard Ross, his eyes filled with a searing, deadly promise of future pain. "I surrender," Lucas said, the words costing him everything. "All of it. The company, the lands, all of it. Just let her go." Richard laughed, a high-pitched, triumphant sound. "Smart man. A good alpha knows when to fold." He shoved me towards Lucas, and as I stumbled into my alpha's protective embrace, Richard's eyes fixed on me, gleaming with powerful, burning contempt. "Live, Mary, and never forget that your life is worth his entire kingdom." Then in a final, brutal twist, an act of pure cruelty meant to show his utter disdain, Richard didn't retreat. He lunged not at Lucas but past us, aiming for the one wolf who had dared to betray him. Chapter 9. Richard Ross's attack on Isaac was a blinding, impossible act of swift cruelty. Lucas roared a sound of anguish, but it was too late. Richard, in his massive white form, tore into the fleeing beater, a final, vicious act of vengeance against the one who had tipped the scales. My vision blurred. I couldn't move, frozen in Lucas's embrace. I could only watch as my protector, my friend, fell to the ground, his lifeblood seeping into the mossy earth. I screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure, unadulterated anguish and rage. Lucas, his face contorted in a mask of primal grief, lunged at Richard. But the white wolf was gone, a blur disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of death and betrayal. I broke free from Lucas and ran to Isaac, falling to my knees beside him, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't touch the wounds. His body was still, his eyes fixed on the night sky, a silent, final apology. "Mary," he whispered, his voice thin, barely audible, Tell Sarah I tried." His eyes glazed over, the life draining out of them. I sobbed, a deep, choking, animal sound of pure grief. Then a low, keening whine filled the air. It was Lucas. He stood over Isaac's body, his head bowed, his body trembling with a loss so profound it felt like a physical tearing of my own soul. He had lost his beater, his brother in arms, the man who had died trying to save his Luna. He had surrendered his empire, and he had done it all to save me. I looked at my alpha, my love, a man physically broken by loss, a ruler brought to his knees by a monster. But the grief in his eyes was slowly, terrifyingly being replaced by something else, a cold, hard, burning rage, a promise of absolute vengeance. He shifted back fully, his human skin pale and taut, but his eyes were still pure, feral amber. He reached out and gently closed Isaac's eyes. He turned to me, and the wolf within him, the alpha, was screaming for blood. And I, the Luna, the woman who had once been a ghost, knew with a chilling certainty that the war had just begun. This wasn't the end, it was the final trigger. We returned to the estate with Isaac's body. The pack was silent, their collective grief a heavy, oppressive cloud. Lucas ordered the traditional preparations, his movements stiff and precise, devoid of human warmth. He was operating purely on alpha instinct and a thirst for retribution. I couldn't sleep. I found Lucas hours later in the great hall, staring into the massive stone fireplace. He was holding a small silver locket, Isaac's sister's picture. "He died for us," Lucas stated, his voice flat, emotionless. "He died for me." "He died for his sister," I corrected gently, walking over and placing my hand on his broad shoulder. "And he died for his pack. He was a hero, Lucas. Richard Ross made him a martyr." He turned, his eyes burning into mine. "I surrendered everything, Mary. My father built Greenwood Global from nothing. My ancestors carved out this territory. I gave it all away in a single breath to save your life, and he still took Isaac." "Your mistake," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "was thinking Richard Ross would honor a human agreement. He's a wolf, Lucas. He only understands two things, power and pain. And in his arrogance he took our surrender and threw it back in our faces." I paused, allowing my lunar authority to flow into my voice, cutting through his despair. "But in taking everything, he made one fatal mistake. He forced us out of the shadows. He revealed his location. He has to be operating nearby to coordinate the immediate hostile takeover of the company and the immediate control of the lands." Lucas looked at me, a flicker of comprehension cutting through the rage. "We know where he is now, Lucas," I continued, my voice firm, hard as stone. "He thinks he has won. He thinks he has destroyed us. But he hasn't destroyed the pack. He hasn't destroyed us." I looked at our intertwined hands. "Richard Ross took your kingdom, but he left you with your queen, and this queen doesn't hide anymore." I stepped back, allowing him space to process the brutal realization. The Luna was gone. The warrior was here. I had to lead him out of this grief, or his rage would destroy us both. "We don't need the company name, Lucas. We don't need the stock holdings. We need vengeance. We need to honor Isaac. And we need to remind Richard Ross exactly what happens when you corner a true alpha and his Luna." The cold, controlled fury in Lucas's eyes slowly gave way to a steely, focused determination. He stood up, towering over me, a dangerous, beautiful force. "You're right," he growled, the alpha returning, sharper than ever. "We hunt." Chapter 10. The morning sun, usually a symbol of comfort, felt like a brutal, unforgiving orb rising over the valley. The scent of rain-soaked earth and wet fur was now heavily tainted with the coppery smell of loss and the lingering acrid musk of the rogues. We stood together in the clearing, Lucas, I, and the rest of the senior pack members. Isaac's body had been prepared for the ancestral rites. Lucas's face was a stone mask, his pain channeled into a terrifying stillness. He had lost his beater. He had surrendered his empire, and he had done it all to save me, only for the monster to execute his brother anyway. But the surrender was a lie, a calculated tactic in a war that had now transitioned into pure retribution. Richard Ross, in his immense arrogance, had no idea what he had unleashed. I looked at Lucas, my hand finding his, our fingers lacing together. The corporate secretary was dead. The timid ghost was gone. In her place was a Luna, a warrior and a strategic partner. My love for him, a love born of moonlight blood and primal instinct, was no longer a weakness. It was our strength, it was our weapon. We held the official strategy session in the Great Hall. Lucas led the discussion, but I spoke as his equal, his voice of cold reason. "Richard Ross is consolidating," Lucas began, his voice deep and commanding, silencing the whispers in the hall. "He will take control of Greenwood Global in the next 48 hours and will attempt to annex the Whispering Peaks land by the end of the week. He thinks he has won the war." "He hasn't," I cut in, stepping forward. My silver wolf, fully embraced, gave my human voice an authority I hadn't possessed weeks ago. "Richard Ross is greedy. He won't scatter his forces to guard all the annexed assets. He will focus on two things: the corporate headquarters in Viridian City, where he can make a public display of dominance, and the old mill boundary, which he knows is our emotional breaking point." The pack looked at me, not with curiosity, but with respect. I was no longer an outsider. I was their Luna, giving them a clear path through the haze of grief. "We will not split our forces," I declared. "We will not defend the borders. We will take the fight to him where he least expects it. Lucas's amber eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the plan already discussed between us. Richard Ross will expect a territorial clash here, Lucas explained, pointing to the estate on the map. He expects us to mourn to lick our wounds. We will do neither. Instead, I continued, we will strike at the very heart of his pride, Greenwood Global. A low murmur went through the pack. Attacking Richard in the city on his turf was a suicidal move. No, Lucas countered, reading their thoughts. He won't be there. He'll be at the old mill waiting for us to come mourn Isaac. He will send a skeleton crew of his most arrogant, inexperienced wolves to occupy the headquarters. Mary and I know the building better than anyone. We designed the security. We know every entry point, every blind spot. Our goal, I summarized, is not to kill them. It is to plant a virus in the main server that completely obliterates all data on Ross Holdings and Greenwood Global, crashing both companies simultaneously and triggering a financial investigation that paralyzes Richard for months. We hit him where he is weakest, his human empire. The pack was electrified. This was a plan of ruthless cunning, not brute force. And then one of the elder wolves asked. Lucas's face darkened, the rage returning, but this time it was sharp and contained. Then we send a message. Richard Ross will find the corporate headquarters reduced to ashes. He will know we are coming for him. The plan was set. We would leave that night, moving in small, silent units. Lucas and I would lead the strike team into the city, using the chaos of the night to execute the corporate takedown. The rest of the pack, led by 2 trusted lieutenants, would fortify the estate, ready for Richard's inevitable, furious return. Before we left, the pack held the rites for Isaac. It was a somber, silent gathering beneath the pines. As I watched the earth close over our brave beater, a raw, primal grief washed over me, but it did not shatter me. Instead, it hardened my resolve. I was not just fighting for survival anymore, I was fighting to avenge a friend. I turned to Lucas. He was standing in his full wolf form, massive and terrifying, his black coat blending with the shadows. I shifted seamlessly, my silver-white fur brushing against his. He nudged my snout gently, a silent communication of trust and love that transcended language. We were Alpha and Luna not just in name but in war. The corporate secretary was gone. The wolf was fully unleashed. It's time, Lucas rumbled, his voice a low vibration that only I could hear. Let's go remind Richard Ross what it feels like to lose everything, I replied, a fierce primal growl rumbling in my chest. The concrete cage of Viridian City, which I had once feared, was now our battleground. Epilogue. The air smelled clean now, scrubbed by the wind and purged of the metallic scent of conflict. It had taken 3 agonizing months to dismantle Richard Ross and his syndicate completely. The corporate strike was a devastating success. Lucas and I, in our full wolf forms, breached the Greenwood Global headquarters with terrifying speed. We installed the virus, watched the servers overload, and then, using carefully planted accelerants, reduced the building to a towering inferno. Richard, enraged and reeling from the financial ruin, retreated to his strongest territorial hold, a remote compound in the southern mountains. He expected Lucas to come for him alone, Alpha versus Alpha. But he had failed to account for the Luna. We tracked him down together, Lucas and I, leading the unified pack. The final battle was not a duel, it was a coordinated tactical siege. I used my speed and agility, distracting Richard while Lucas delivered the final decisive blow. Richard Ross, the King of Chaos, was destroyed, his broken pack scattered and fleeing. Today, 2 months later, the Whispering Peaks estate felt different. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet, vibrant stability. The new construction on the residential block was finished. Sarah, Isaac's sister, was safely integrated into the pack, protected by us, her brother's sacrifice honored in our daily lives. Lucas and I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, the recovered lands sprawling out beneath a golden afternoon sun. He was in his human form, perfectly tailored, but the primal edge was permanently etched into his demeanor. He was still the ruthless CEO, but now he wielded that power for his pack. Greenwood Global is gone, Lucas murmured, his arm around my waist, pulling me close. We've rebranded. The new company is called Lunar Aegis, fitting since you did most of the strategic work. I just supplied the location and the motivation, I replied, leaning my head against his shoulder. My body was healing, my spirit whole. I no longer wore the sensible skirts. I wore leather and simple, powerful clothing that allowed me to shift instantly. You supplied the fire, Mary. He turned, his amber eyes full of a deep, possessive love that no longer felt like a cage, but an unbreakable connection. You taught me that a good alpha doesn't just defend his kingdom, he listens to his Luna. You are my reason, my strength, and my co-ruler. I looked out over the thriving territory. No more running, no more hiding. My wolf was fully embraced, and I had never felt more at peace or more powerful. We have a kingdom to build, I said, turning to face him, my hand resting against the warm skin of his chest. He smiled, a genuine, powerful curve of his lips that sent a familiar jolt of electricity through me. Let's go home, Luna, he rumbled, his voice thick with promise. The alpha and his mate walked down the ridge, the silver light of the impending full moon waiting patiently to crown their new reign. My life was no longer a lie. It was a terrifying, exhilarating truth, and it was just beginning. If you leave without subscribing, you're literally letting Richard Ross win. Do you really want that? Hit that button to join the pack and prove your loyalty in the comments.